I'm not gonna lie to you, this was weird. I still remember years ago, the first time that I saw this and I learned about this, and I was actually around an Adobe engineer, and I was like, are you serious? And sure enough, I went and I tried it out and I did all the tests, and it was true. There is a vibrance adjustment inside of your local adjustments, which at first glance, you're hearing this and you might think, well, yeah, there is. No, go look. Well, it'll be on screen here. You will see there's only a saturation adjustment, but there's actually a way to get vibrance. It's weird. Let's just take a look. So as we jump over here into Lightroom, I'm going to go over, I'll talk a little bit about landscapes, talk a little bit about portraits, but we're just going to use a more colorful image so we can see the colors and how vibrance and saturation interact, and you'll be able to see the secret vibrance slider adjustment a lot easier this way. So what we're going to do is go into develop, but first I'm going to make several virtual copies. I just right click on this and choose create virtual copy once, right click, create virtual copy again, and do it one more time. So essentially what I have are 4 different copies of this photo, the original, and then 3 new copies to work with. So let's go to this first copy. I'm going to go to the develop module and I'm going to crank up my vibrance to 100%. Okay. Vibrance tends to retain your skin tone colors, yellows, oranges a little bit, and then saturate the rest. Not that it won't at 100 work on some of those colors. Everything at 100, you never generally do it, but helps the example here. So let's go to the next photo here, crank up saturation to 100%. Okay. So if we can compare the two, you'll definitely see there's vibrance. Holds back on the oranges and the reds. There's saturation. Those become very, very radioactive. Okay. Now let's go to our third option. And this is where you're going to see the secret little vibrance adjustment come in. So we're going to go to any one of our local adjustment tools. And the common thing that I hear from people is that, how come I can't paint vibrance onto a photo? So rather, let's go to the gradient filter here. All right, I'm going to double click the word effect, make sure everything is zeroed out. And I'm just going to drag a gradient off the canvas here, just on the edge. All right. So there is actually no transition happening. You can see it's either it's going to affect the whole photo, okay, because I dragged it off of the photo. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the saturation adjustment and we're going to crank it up to 100%. All right. So that should give us 100% saturation. Well, let's compare all 3 of these. And what I did is I just opened them all as layers inside of Photoshop and stacked them on top of each other. Just makes it a little bit easier to take a look at this way so we can compare the differences. So here's our vibrance layer, and then here's our saturation layer. Exactly what we'd expect, right? Saturation blows out those oranges and yellows and reds a little bit more and faster. So vibrance, saturation. Now let's turn that off. And what I did is I put the graduated filter layer, which is 100% saturation essentially. I put that down here at the bottom. When I turn on the saturation layer, these should look identical. They are the same thing, right? Well, they don't. See that? So there's your graduated filter layer. There's your saturation layer. Very, very different. Okay, so now let's turn on the vibrance layer and they're almost identical. Here's your graduated filter at 100% saturation, mind you, and here is your vibrance. Grad filter, vibrance, basically the same. If you want to see it hold true again, we've got vibrance on this layer, we've got saturation on this layer, especially with a portrait here. It is blowing, it's radioactive skin tones. Not that they don't get bad with vibrance, but again, you'd never do this at 100%. So let's turn both of those off. We got a graduated filter at 100% saturation. We turn on the saturation layer. They are very, very different. We turn on the vibrance layer. They are essentially the same. So flip back over here into Lightroom. So now let's flip back over to Lightroom. What we know now is that we actually do have a vibrance local adjustment. When we take saturation and we go positive, it is vibrance. Now, when we go negative, it actually becomes saturation. It becomes negative saturation. So this one saturation adjustment within our local adjustment tools, this one saturation adjustment actually plays 2 different parts in a way. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. I'm just telling you how it is. For the most part, this is a good thing. I would say the one if I'm going to be doing, working on a portrait, Vibrance is usually the tool that I'll use. If I'm working on a landscape, I go between both of them. And honestly, I usually tend to favor saturation a little bit, because I'm okay if I saturate some of those yellows and oranges and reds a little bit in a landscape photo, where a lot of times I generally wouldn't want to do that to a portrait photo. And on the same topic as color, since we're talking about vibrance and saturation, there are tools in Lightroom that actually have a color picker. And I have a video that will show you how you can use that color picker to pick a color from anywhere. So if you're inside of Lightroom and you want to pick a color and a tint to add to something, and you want a very, very specific color, this video will help out.